I discovered 3 terrifying true stories that haunted my sleep. You won't believe what I found. I never should have opened that door. The chill that ran down my spine was immediate. I can still recall the dread that settled in my stomach that night like a lead weight, heavy and unbearable. My normal routine, tucked safely into bed after a long day, was abruptly shattered. The faint creaking of old would echo through my darkened house. Each sound amplified the whispers of memories that shouldn't have been there. Lurking in the shadows, my heart raced. I was wide awake, my senses heightened. The darkness outside seemed to seep in, wrapping around me like a cold, suffocating blanket. I could hear them whispers, soft but insistent, almost like they were beckoning me. I forced myself to listen, but all I could feel was dread building inside me, as if I was being drawn into some unknown horror waiting just beyond my vision. I tried to shake it off, focus on the mundane, but my eyes darted around the room, searching for movement. The shadows felt alive, shifting restlessly as if they had their own agenda. It was too quiet for comfort. A rustle from the hallway sent me into a fresh panic. I clenched my fists, feeling the sweat bead on my forehead, every fiber of my being screaming at me to run. I wanted to scream, but the air felt thick, caught in my throat. Then came the noise, a scraping sound, slow and intentional, dragging like fingernails across glass. It sent a jolt of ice through me. Couldn't breathe. What was out there? My pulse hammered louder than my thoughts. My instincts urged me to flee. The rational part of me urged caution. But could it be nothing? My mind swirled with paranoia. And then the lights flickered. A moment of clarity in the swirling shadows. I thought about that door. The one I never should have opened. It had always been a problem. A creaky, rotting thing that stood there, humming with secrets. I never took it seriously until that night. A mistake, or a deadly invitation. The whispers intensified. Panic gripped me, tightening around my chest. What if I was not alone? What if something had come through that door? Instinctively, I stepped toward it, feet carrying me forward as if possessed. My breaths came quick and shallow. Just one peek, I thought, just to see. But what was lurking in the dark? As I reached for the handle, a loud crash echoed behind me. My heart skipped, the noise exploded in the silence, shattering the tension like glass. I spun around, eyes wide, the depth of that darkness swallowing me whole. My breath caught, and chills raced along my skin. I could feel a presence, something beyond me, beyond my understanding. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, dark and twisted. It stood just outside the reach of the light. And then silence. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence dragged on, heavy and oppressive, each second stretching into an eternity. The figure lingered at the edge of the light. Its undefined shape seemed to pulse and quiver, feeding off my terror like a vulture circling its freshly found prey. I strained my eyes, willing them to adjust, but the deeper darkness beyond the light held too many secrets. I could feel it watching, a predator calculating its next move. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was paralyzed, a moth caught in a deadly glow. It was then that I heard it, low and guttural, like a whisper threaded through gritted teeth, echoing through the silence with familiar disdain. You opened the door, it hissed softly, each word sealing the air around me. The shadows writhed, feeding off the dread I felt. The voice was wrong in every way. Not just a sound but a sensation scraping along the inside of my skull, igniting old memories I could not retrieve. They'll make you remember, it croaked, and before I could process the threat, the figure lunged forward, moving faster than any horror I had ever encountered. I stumbled backward in reflex, falling against the wall, my heart thrumming like a trapped bird that I in a split second. The glow from the lights blinked again, flickering anxiously, and just like that, the figure melted into the shadows, vanishing like smoke. Relief crashed over me, but I knew it was a false sense of safety. Whatever that was, it hadn't left. It was merely lurking, waiting for the right moment as I gathered myself off the floor. Adrenaline still surging through my limbs, the walls felt closer, as if they were shifting, constricting. I could hear them again, the whispers louder now, a cacophony of voices layered over each other, blending into an unsettling harmony that chilled my bones. They taunted me, their words chaotic and jumbled, but one phrase rang clear above the rest. "It follows you." Sobbing, I pressed my back against the wall, struggling to regain my composure. I glanced toward that cursed door, the weight of its sinister allure pulling at the corners of my mind. My curiosity battled with my terror, the urge to flee clashing with a compulsion to uncover its secrets that I pivoted away, trying to block the door from my thoughts. But the moment I turned, I caught a glimpse of something gliding down the hallway, a serpentine shadow that seemed to corrode the space it slid through. Panic surged anew, and I took a step back, but then another sound echoed. A faint thudding like a heartbeat growing stronger, rhythmic and relentless. The oppressive darkness was thumping along with it. "Help me," a voice whispered then, cutting through the cacophony. It was a woman's voice, timid, weary. I felt her desperation sink beneath the surface of my skin. "Please, it's coming." I looked toward the source, but the hallway swallowed her words, the shadows rippling as if to mock her plea. The thudding intensified, now echoing in my very core. Heart racing, I clutched my head, struggling to stave off the disorienting pressure building around me. "You should be afraid," the guttural voice echoed once more, taunting. "You'll never escape." My feet moved almost against my will, pulled toward the door just a few steps away. If only I could push it shut, lock it away forever. But I hesitated, caught in purgatory, the dread of the unknown yanking at my heart while the frantic whispers begged me to turn back. Suddenly, the door cracked open slowly, spilling a sliver of light into the abyss, illuminating the dust motes that hung suspended in the air. The soft glow felt inviting, contrary to the growing malevolence that saturated the house. My hand twitched, and before I could think better of it, my fingers curled around the cold metal handle, a silent plea woven with dread and desire as I twisted it open. The world beyond seemed to breathe, exuding a strange pull that wrapped around me like a fog. I had to know. I had to see what lay behind that cursed door. With a sudden gust, the candle on the nearby table flickered and went out, darkness crashing in like a tidal wave. Stepped inside and the door slammed shut behind me, the finality of the click echoing like a death knell. Panic surged again, and as I swung around to escape, I froze. The darkness pulsated. It was alive, and it whispered my name. Then, a familiar face materialized from the void of Face ID, thought lost forever, eyes hollow and sunken, a smirk playing on cracked lips. It wasn't just a memory. It was her, and she was not alone. The shadows morphed around her, growing teeth and claws as it all rushed toward me, an avalanche of nightmares hungry for my despair. "What did you do?" she asked softly, unrelenting terror consuming me as her eyes locked onto mine, her haunting gaze piercing through my very soul. In that moment, the world crumbled, and I could feel their doom closing in. "You opened the door," they all echoed in unison, a cacophony that promised no escape. Scream after scream exploded in my head as the darkness lunged forward. And just like that, it devoured everything around me into the unfathomable void. I was lost, and then there was only silence. It was the kind of silence that clamored, a heavy absence that cradled 1,000 unspoken horrors. I thought I would wake to the soft embrace of morning light, yet the void held me like an unwanted guest in the depths of existence's darkest corners. I floated in an expanse of nothingness, a sensation of weightlessness twisted with terror, the echo of my own breathing the only anchor to remind me I was still alive. But just as I began to grasp clarity in the confusion, the whisper returned, insistent and slithering, slinking around my thoughts like a snake. You should have never come here, you cannot escape. Each word was etched in acid, corroding my resolve. Reeking of despair, I turned, my heart racing as I reached out for something solid, anything to ground me, but the abyss swallowed up my hands. It felt as if the darkness itself was breathing, wrapping around my limbs, pulling me deeper into its grotesque embrace. Panic flared. I was not alone. Suddenly, a figure flickered into being ahead, luminous yet terrifying, composed of shadow and light. I blinked, straining to confirm if my mind had conjured it from the depths of fear. But there she was. The familiar face, now twisted by an uncanny malevolence, a visage I had longed to see, now marred by what lurked beyond the door I had dared to open. "You've disturbed things best left hidden," she said, her voice a haunting melody that sent radiating chills through my spine. "Don't you realize? They starve. They feed off your doubt, your fears, your very essence." Each word dripped with venomous sweetness, her gaze tracing the contours of my soul with a hunger that shook me to my core. Around her, the shadows danced eagerly, a swirling vortex of dark tendrils reaching toward me like skeletal fingers, desperate to snatch my life force. In sheer instinct, I turned to run, only to feel the pull of the unseen force tugging me back, relentless and insatiable. Whispering voices echoed through the void, distorted laughter echoing in my ears as they announced my fate. "You opened the door," they chanted it over and over, a macabre symphony of mockery that burrowed painfully inside. I stumbled, despair clawing at my throat as I fought against the suffocating void. "What do you want?" I pleaded, the desperation woven through my voice like a fragile thread. "Your memory is the key," she answered, all shadows and whispers now. The presence around her surged, a collective of despair sharpening into an edge. "Connects us. We're waiting. Because you opened the door." Unseen hands gripped my throat then, a heavy, insidious weight that crushed my breath to whispers. Images flashed through my mind, dark corridors, crying children, lost souls drifting in the currents of fog. Each memory bled into the next, the colors of joy replaced by hues of terror. They were my memories and theirs, woven together in a tapestry of anguish. I fell to my knees in the void, feeling the laughter and cries merge into a pathetic unified sound. The darkness was alive, feeding off my memories, distorting them, relishing in my horror. I could feel the weight of their hunger pressing down on me, waiting for the moment I would completely surrender to despair. "Join us," she breathed, leaning in closer, shadows engulfing her figure. Her smile widened into something deformed, her pallid skin drawing tight over bared teeth. "Escape is a lie. We are your past. We are your future. Remember." "No!" I screamed, the power of defiance surging through my veins, pushing back against the gnawing darkness. I ran blindly, propelled by instinct, until a pulsing light flickered in the distance. Desperation ignited hope within me. I dashed toward it, feeling the relentless grasp of shadows clawing at me, curious whispers hissing at my heels with each frantic step. I could feel the memory of the door press heavier at the back of my mind. The sinuous shape of it, the cold handle beneath my trembling fingers. If only I could find a way back, but the shadows nipped at my ankles, draining strength with every moment, their weight increasing as silence closed. Then, in a brief moment of clarity, something inside me remembered the light was not salvation but a gateway. I had to make it before the shadows consumed me whole. I surged forward, every step an act of rebellion against the darkness threatening to bring me down. The flickering light loomed larger, blazing like a beacon. As I dove towards it, shadows erupted around me, shrieking in fury. Tendrils lashed out, grazing my skin like icy breath. No longer mere whispers but howls of anguish clamored for my soul. I could feel the tendrils trying to pull me back, but as I reached for the light, an unearthly roar erupted, shattering the silence with a cacophony of terror that rattled every bone in my body. I felt the surge of shadows closing in on me, an overwhelming wave that threatened to snuff the light out forever. Just before I breached the threshold of the light, an icy grip encircled my wrist, pulling me back with a strength I could never have anticipated. The face of my long-lost companion surged forward one last time, eyes filled with a mix of longing and malevolence, the shadows consuming her form entirely. "Remember," she cried, her voice lost in the frenzy of chaos tailing me throughout. And then, everything collapsed into darkness. The light flickered, then winked out. I screamed, an unholy sound that shattered the silence once more. Because in that shimmering moment before being engulfed, a horrifying realization pierced through the gloom. I wasn't merely being haunted, I had become one of them. And as darkness drank me in, I felt the pulse of a shattered door beckoning me further into the abyss. A world of shadows whispering promises of dreadful memories. My heart thudded wildly against an invisible wall, the only sign of my existence in this frantic void. I was ensnared in a network of echoes, each distorted laugh and pitiful wail combining into a symphony that clawed at my sanity. The shadows coiled around me, their presence insidious and consuming, reminding me I was no longer merely trapped, I was claimed. A reluctant vessel in their malevolent game. As my senses blurred, surreal images clawed at my mind, flickering before me like a deranged film reel. I was swept into fragmented memories of darkened hallways, the wailing of children lost in their despair, and the dancing shadows that fed on their cries echoing through the emptiness. I could barely discern which memories belonged to me and which belonged to the trapped souls that had perished in this twisted reality. I could feel their pain feed into my being, each pang pulling me deeper into their haunting narrative. And then, amidst the chaos, clarity returned with a jolt, a glimmer of hope sparking within the maw of despair. I realized if I could override the shadow's influence, perhaps I could find a way to confront the door that had unleashed this torment. But in establishing this rippling resolve, an all-consuming dread gripped my heart. What tether bound my memories to the darkness? In the marrow of these thoughts, a memory flickered unbidden, one distinct and sharp as a shard of glass. I was in that old house, the fading pastel walls cloaked in dust, the smell of decay mingled with the sweet aroma of my childhood days. I saw myself a younger version standing in that very corridor, ear pressed against a door with peeling paint. The hushed sobs of my friend resonated through the wood, pleading for rescue from whatever darkness lurked behind it. Flickers of faces danced before my eyes, taunting, depicting those I cared for yet could not save. Their names echoed through my skull. You should have listened, they seemed to implore, drowning my thoughts in guilt. Tears streamed down my cheeks, merging with an urgency rising from within, a desperation to uncover the truths hidden behind pain. Every locked door has someone waiting, a voice whispered, weaving its way through my cacophony of despair. I strained to pinpoint the source, my heart racing as muted shadows receded. I pivoted to confront the origin, finding myself once more in that dim corridor of my youth. The door still stood, but now it appeared marked with sigils of dread and despair. How often had I ignored its ominous warning? "What do you want?" I cried out, desperation bleeding through my voice. The door remained eerily silent, but an unseen force compelled me forward. As I grasped the cold handle, a blistering pain lanced through my hand, sending shockwaves through my body. It was as if an electric current sparked through my veins, igniting every memory I thought I had buried, every transgression I had buried deep. Their faces warred against the backdrop of darkness, fury transforming their features, all converging as I twisted the handle. With an unsettling creak, the door yawned open, revealing a Stygian depth within. No light weighed against the shadows of despair, only a chill that seeped into my bones. I braced myself, the weight of my companions' gazes pressing upon me, as I stepped inside. The atmosphere thickened instantaneously, wrapping me in labored breaths of long-gone souls. They swirled around me like a tornado of regret, and I staggered back, my body betraying my resolve. This is where it began, I recognized, overwhelmed. Each step echoed the burdens of those who followed the restless shadows. The lamenting whispers crescendoed into a wail. Horrors unseen tugged at my very essence, dragging me closer to an unfathomable truth. The doorway behind me snapped shut with a resounding finality. Panic surged anew, pulsing through me. The shadows thickened, their grip relentless, binding me within their chaos. I frantically searched for an escape as figures contorted in agony loomed just beyond the reach of my sight. their pleas muted but painfully. Tangible. Help us, they begged, their voices mingling with the wailing chorus that drowned the air. You're too late, they cried, torment spilling from each word, longing for release from their ethereal shackles. The darkness pulsed around me, feeding off my terror, as I battled the grip of despair attempting to consume my thoughts. Remember, the shadows hissed, their hunger entwining with my thoughts. Just as I felt myself about to succumb, an image reignited my determination, a child's face, ghostly and forlorn, pressing against a window, waiting for something, a savior, a release. I realized then what they sought. My memories had formed a tether between us, blurring the lines separating their anguished cries from my own. Fueled by newfound urgency, I scoured through the shadows, desperate to reclaim my reality, to unlock the door to their past, their present, to unearth the truths of what lay hidden within that cursed space. Yet just as I set my resolve, I felt a sudden shift in the air. The temperature plummeted, and before I could react, black tendrils lunged from the darkness, seizing my consciousness with a vice-like grip. They constricted tighter. My vision blurred, the echoes of anguish crescendoing into a relentless storm of despair. As the world around me dissolved into an inky abyss, a voice rose above the clamor, chilling me to my core. Remember, my heart raced as the reminder echoed, and darkness pulled me deeper into a void filled with promises of horrors yet untold. And then, just before everything dissolved into a numbing silence, I caught a glimpse of a face familiar yet twisted by shadows. It was my own, staring back at me from the depths of despair, mouth curled into a grotesque smile. Welcome home, it mouthed, before disappearing into the shadows, making room for the nightmare awaiting me within the suffocating darkness. Because in that fleeting moment, I realized that to confront the past meant embracing the horrors lurking within, and I was all too unprepared for what awaited me in the haze of the unknown. The darkness tightened around me like a vice, stifling the air, devouring my breath. I stumbled deeper into the chasm, my heartbeat pounding like thunder in my ears. Shadows swirled around me, swirling, weaving their despair into my very essence. I was slipping into what I could not tell, but my instincts warned me, urged me to flee. Still, the memory of that warped smile haunted me, its macabre welcome reverberating like a death knell in my mind. Look closer, the shadows whispered, their voices melding into one mesmerizing chant, luring me to tread deeper into the abyss. I resisted, clenching my trembling hands, anchoring myself to the frayed remnants of courage tethered within me. But the call was too intoxicating, a siren's song seducing me towards the truth I had long sought to avoid. As if answering the beckoning shadows, the void around me rippled, revealing flickerings of light, not the warm glow of salvation, but the cruel flickers of nightmarish images. They surged forward, assaulting my senses. Faces appeared, each contorted in agony, writhing in unfamiliarities that scratched at my memories, tugging at the very fabric of my reality. Each visage echoed a story of torment, their collective wails merging into a din that reached into the furthest corners of my mind, stretching old scars anew. Find us, they implored, their plaintive cries slicing like daggers. You are the key. A surge of terror burst forth within me, igniting the remnants of a panic that had lain dormant. The weight of their words so suffocating, so saturated with despair, threatened to consume me. I stumbled backward, almost falling, but their lamenting faces blurred, twisting into something else. Their expressions shifted from pain to something mirthful, laden with malevolence. And then I saw it amid the ghostly faces, a patch of darkness deeper than the rest, pulsating like a heartbeat. Drawn by an unseen force, my gaze fixed upon it. The shadows breathed around it, swirling with anticipation, a frenzy that raised the hairs on my neck. I staggered forward involuntarily, consumed by an insatiable curiosity, each step pulling me closer to that consuming void. In its center, a mirror emerged, its surface rippling like water disturbed by an unseen hand. The reflections flickered between reality and the grotesque, suspended memories warped into shapes I barely recognized. I stood before it, breathless, my own reflection soon swallowed by an unsettling vision. Suddenly, with a crack that echoed like thunder, the mirror shattered, shards splintering into 1,000 shards of obsidian, reflecting fractured images of souls, all trapped in torment. Each glimmering piece held a glimpse of despair, a child crying in vain, a mother's desperate reach for a hand long lost, and something worse, something dark creeping behind them, laughing, watching. Instinctively, I recoiled, but the shards glowed with a malevolent pull, tugging at me, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. "You can't turn away," they cooed, voices rising like a tempest, demanding to be acknowledged. "You are one of us. You will find a way, you must dig deeper." The shadows thickened, insidious tendrils encircling my wrists and ankles, binding me in an unholy embrace. The reflections began to merge, twisting into grotesque simulations of my loved ones, their faces contorted in eternal despair. "Help us," they cried, echoing through the void, voices overlapping into a cacophony that rattled my bones, driving me toward the brink of madness. Suddenly, one image broke free from the pulsating mass, a woman's face, ethereal yet distinct, pressed against the shards with an urgency that shocked me into focus. I recognized her, but a sense of foreboding twisted my gut. "You have to remember," she began, her voice muffled by the chaos around us. "The ritual, it's not done, you must." Then, without warning, she was ripped away, swallowed by the very void that gave birth to these horrors. The tendrils ensnared me tighter, squeezing the breath from my lungs, my heart racing as reality slipped further from my grasp. Realized, in horror, I wasn't merely an intruder. I was dragged into this nightmare, an unwitting participant in a game beyond comprehension. The darkness enveloped me, drowning my senses in its depth. "You cannot escape," they murmured, shadows wrapping around my thoughts. "You belong to us now." But within that hopelessness, a flicker ignited my spirit, the need to fight, to confront this malice shackled within. I strained against my bonds, summoning every ounce of strength, my thoughts racing. "I will find the truth," I shouted into the gale of despair, "whatever it takes." And in that moment, as if my defiance cracked the darkness, a rift opened. A terrifying chorus reached a maddening crescendo, a cacophony of pleas and laughter flooding through the opening. I felt myself being drawn, the temptation to step through the threshold palpable. But before I could make a decision, the rift imploded, and the shadows surged, wrenching my vision back to the faces that encased me in their torment. Each one stared with a mixture of fury and pleading, as if the disturbance had drawn every lost soul to me, their struggles driving me deeper, threatening to pull me into their hellish existence. Then, just as I braced myself for the onslaught, I caught a glimpse of something in the overpowering shadows, an outline dancing, whispering secrets of the ages. I blinked, and then, it was gone, leaving only an echo woven within the screams of a name that crept through my mind, chilling my very core. Ember. And just as that morbid whisper faded, the shadows broke open, revealing a landscape of horror, waiting to consume me whole. This was only the beginning of the hell that awaited, and I was about to discover that the greatest terror lay not within the darkness, but within the truth that beckoned from the shadows, ready to unravel everything I believed. The sudden shift in the air sent a shiver down my spine. The shadows receded just enough to reveal a nightmarish landscape pulsating with a sickly light that seemed to ooze from the very ground. Each footfall echoed with unnerving clarity, each step reverberating through the spine of the dying world around me. I gathered my breath, heart threatening to burst forth as I steadied my resolve. Whatever Ember meant, it felt pivotal, an anchor in the storm of chaos. Before me lay a fractured world, a vast expanse of jagged rocks and swirling mists that clung to the ground, coiling like snakes, whispering secrets of forgotten sorrows. Twisted trees protruded from the earth, their gnarled branches reaching like desperate hands toward a pitch-black sky. Their leaves dry and shriveled, a grim reminder of a life that once breathed here. As I ventured deeper into this surreal horror, memories of my surroundings faded. The suffocating grip of fear morphed into a haunting curiosity, pulling me forward. A cacophony of voices surged from the depths of the fog, snaking into my mind, filling it with fragmented phrases and guttural cries. The keeper. One voice rasped. Its sound gravelly and ancient. Find the keeper. Who is the keeper? I murmured aloud, my voice swallowed by the cacophony. The shadows trembled, morphing into grotesque shapes that leered and slithered around me, feeding off my confusion. Without warning, a fog rolled in thicker, pressing in on all sides. I felt the temperature drop, a chill wrapping around my bones. Within the mist, I glimpsed a flicker of momentous silhouette darting just out of sight, always just beyond the periphery. I stumbled toward it, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't understand, stepping through patches of dense shadow that thrummed with a life of their own. Seek the truth, the voices sang, rising and falling like a twisted melody. The air smelled of decay, mingled with an acrid sweetness that burned at my throat and muddled my senses. The last remnants of sunlight dimmed behind me, until it was swallowed whole by the impending night, dressing the land in a cloak of tangible dread. That I rounded a twisted tree bent with despair, and there a figure stood at the foot of a hill, draped in darkness thick as a shroud. It was neither man nor beast, but an amalgamation of both, with eyes that glowed like smoldering coals, piercing through the fog directly at me. An unsettling grin stretched across its face, sharp and mocking, unveiling rows of jagged teeth. Welcome, seeker, it rasped, voice reverberating like a deep bell echoing through the night. You have come to find the keeper good. Before you can embrace what lies ahead, you must accept the truth of your past. The name Ember pulsed like a drum in my mind, but the mere thought of who or what she was sent a panic crashing down around me. What do you know of Ember? I demanded, forcing the question past trembling lips. What does she have to do with any of this? The creature's eyes narrowed, a near-sympathetic look in its otherwise horrifying visage. Ember, the one who fell into shadows, seeking the light of a truth she never wished to hold. Its laughter resonated through the clearing, melding with the whispering shadows that twirled around me, spinning tales of sorrow. But you haven't merely found her, child of the light. You've called forth a reality you weren't prepared to face. I trembled where I stood, gripped by the weight of unrelenting dread, knowing deep down that the answer would unveil a grotesque truth that lurked just beyond my understanding. What did she do? The creature leaned closer, its hot breath washing over me like the breath of a furnace. She broke the boundary, split the realms. Look around you. These souls drift here because of her. The truth lies within. You must release what is trapped. Before I could respond, the ground quaked beneath us violently, and a fissure opened nearby, unleashing a torrent of shadows that writhed and screamed. From the depths emerged specters, faces twisted in anguish, their empty eyes searching for solace. Each one carried memories of love lost, of betrayal, of vengeance seeking redemption. Help them, or they will drag you in. The creature's eyes blazed with an unnatural fire, pressing me to make a choice. My heart raced, the air thick with the static of supernatural energy, and despair clenched my gut. Before I could gather my courage to ascertain my next move, the shadows surged overwhelming, insatiable, flooding up from the depths like a tidal wave of nightmares. Find the keeper. The voices screamed in union as I instinctively turned to flee, desperation clawing at my mind. But in my frantic movement, I could almost swear I caught sight of a figure amongst the chaos, a glimpse of a body, barely recognizable, draped in darkness. Not a single word slipped from my lips. Ember. And just like that, the shadows closed in, swallowing me whole as I was dragged into the depths. The once distanced whispers sharpening into an urgent chant, enveloped in chaos. The last things I distinctly grasped were the glowing eyes of my terrible counterpart and the urgency of the keeper's demand. A shiver of realization settling in the hunt had only just begun. Then everything faded into utter darkness. I awoke gasping, tethered to the void by an unyielding thread of dread. The silence wrapped around me like a shroud, heavy and oppressive. Yet within the stillness lay an undercurrent of something sinister that seemed to thrum beneath my skin. I blinked against the darkness, struggling to discern my surroundings. Shadows danced in desperate flickers, the remnants of intangible whispers weaving in and out of my consciousness. I was no longer on the fractured landscape. I found myself within a cavern, walls slick with moisture, glistening like the eyes of unseen watchers. The only light came from phosphorescent fungi that draped themselves like ghostly vines across the ceiling, illuminating grotesque carvings etched deep into the rock symbols of torment that sent shivers crawling along the nape of my neck. A distant sound reverberated through the chamber, a gentle splashing like a low whisper, seeping into my consciousness. I rose to my feet, compelled by an urge I couldn't ignore. With every step I took, the ground squelched underfoot, returning echoes that felt like heartbeats, as if I was walking atop something alive. As I ventured deeper, the darkness grew more palpable, thickening around me, each inhale tainted with an iron tang that spoke of blood and sacrifice. Flickering shadows darted at the edge of my vision, hiding from the light, ramping up the feeling that I was being hunted. Ember, I whispered, choking on the name, each syllable laced with an intertwining hope and despair. Where are you? Need to save echoed a fragmented voice from the shadows, barely audible yet distinct. It sounded familiar, like the forgotten memory of laughter woven with pain, tugging at strands of my past. The words morphed into a haunting plea that twisted my insides. I pressed forward, guided by the rhythm of the voice that seemed to weave in and out of the rock, until I stumbled upon a wider opening. The cavern shifted into a surreal amphitheater, shadows pooling into a thick mass in the center. Now the splashing was louder, almost rhythmic, resembling an ominous heartbeat that synchronized with my own. Above, the fungus dimmed, pulsating like a breathing entity, coiling around strange symbols that glowered as if alive. And then I saw her, a silhouette, suspended in the air above the pool, hair flowing like liquid darkness, intertwining with the shadows as if they were one and the same. Ember's eyes glowed faintly, flickering with a mixture of defiance and despair. It was her, yet not Heron Echo from another world, caught between what was and what could never be. Ember, I shouted, taking a step toward her. Don't come closer, she warned, her voice a fraying thread that barely threaded the chasm between us. Her features were pale and stretched with anguish, the very essence of her being flickering like a dying flame. They will awaken. You mustn't disturb the balance. The shadows around her bucked violently, twisting as if sentient, alive with rage at my approach. The splashing intensified, and from the pool erupted writhing shapes, half-formed images clawing their way toward the surface. Drenched in the darkness they fed upon. Faces I almost recognized surfaced momentarily: a mother, a brother, friends lost to moments of betrayal and unending sorrow. Ember, I can help you. I can pull you out of there. I reached my hand toward her, an urge so fierce I felt it stabbing through the veil of sanity. No, the more you try, the more they'll seize dominion over your soul. You need to escape now before it's too late. I faltered, trapped between the truth of her words and the desperate yearning to claim her, to grip her hand and break free of this nightmare together. The very ground shifted beneath me as the shadows surged deeper, elongating toward the pool in a cacophony of hisses and tortured breath. Ember, I won't leave you. Run, she screamed, her voice splintering the air. But before I could react, the shadows erupted, launching tendrils of darkness toward me in a frenzied rush. I stumbled back, panic crystallizing in my chest as I felt the cold grip of despair snaking around my ankles, dragging me toward the churning waters of grief and rage. Suddenly, something shifted among the thrashing shadows, coalescing into a figureea grotesque visage rising to the surface, its eyes hollow yet alight with a dreadful hunger. My heart pounded as I recognized the face, twisted by loss and hatred, eyes reflecting both familiarity and rage. A tortured version of someone I once loved. Join us. It hissed, its voice a dark lullaby weaved with the echoes of my past. Before I could utter a sound, something icy grasped my wrist, pulling me deeper into the churning depths. Ember's scream echoed through my mind, and as the shadows surrounded me, her face twisted in agony flickered away until darkness swallowed it whole. Help us, the voices howled as I sank further into despair, an inescapable grip of horror closing in around me. Panic seized my breath, drowning me in a wideout of terror. I was lost, and a singular thought rippled through my mind like a chilling promise. What if the keeper was not someone to be found, but something to be awakened? And amid the abyss, as my vision blurred and spiraled, the echoes of my past reached out, crying for mercy, asking not for salvation, but for revenge. The last sight that surfaced in my mind was Ember's hollow gaze as the shadows embraced me completely before my scream alone was swallowed by the void. And then silence reigned. The silence was unnaturally profound, a heavy fog that drifted through the recesses of my mind, engulfing me in a void deeper than the one I had just escaped. I floated in a consciousness devoid of time, where memories twisted and reeled like a broken carousel, my sense of self splintering under the weight of what I'd witnessed. I emerged from the depths, gasping not for breath but for clarity, the shimmering darkness morphing into a panorama of dread. I blinked against the fluorescent glow of the fungi, now surrounding me in a mocking dance, illuminating the walls that seemed to pulse with anticipation. Each symbol carved into the rock grew more pronounced, twisting into a morbid tapestry narrating tales of anguish and madness. Faces leered at me from the stone, their mouths gaping in silent screams, a chorus of the damned perpetually recounting their fate. Then, I heard Ida low, persistent humming vibrating through the air, a melody both beautiful and horrifying, teasing my sanity and beckoning me closer. My limbs felt heavy as if submerged in a liquid weight, but against my will, I found my feet moving towards the source, propelled by the insidious call through the archway of a narrow passage. I stepped into a smaller chamber. The oppressive atmosphere squeezed around me, suffocating and intoxicating all at once. A huge stone altar sat at the center, marked with more entwined glyphs. An unholy offering lay there, surrounded by flickering candlelight, their flames revealing a frayed tapestry adorned with intricate images of ritual, pain, and ecstasy. What is this place? I muttered absent-mindedly, my throat dry and cracked, yet my voice echoed against the damp stone walls, returning like a taunt. Place of reckoning, a voice answered, soft like velvet yet laced with venom. I turned sharply, heart racing, my mind racing with the prospect of another grotesque manifestation of my memories. Instead, a figure shrouded in darkness stood at the periphery of the chamber, its identity obscured by a hooded cloak that seemed woven from shadows themselves. Who are you? I demanded, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my facade of bravery. Merely a guide to truths that lie beneath the surface, it replied, gliding closer to the altar. The fabric of its cloak whispered secrets, each sound prickling my skin. This altar is your only hope, the key to bridge the realms. Blood will weave the bond, but are you prepared for the revelations that await? I hesitated, recalling Ember's warnings, the terrified intensity in her gaze that screamed for me to flee. Yet curiosity snaked its way through my spine, igniting a deep-rooted desire to unearth the hidden layers of my realitimy own fate. What must I do? I asked, almost drowned by fear and longing. Offer what you hold dear, the figure instructed, extending a pallid hand towards the altar. A chilling stillness seeped into the air, thickening like fog as dread clung to me. The shadows desire a pledge, an offering of memory. You must decide what you are willing to lose. That I stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force, trying to cling to what remained of my sanity. But flashes of my past blitzed through my thought slaughter that turned to screams, smiles that morphed into lifeless expressions, betrayals that wrapped around me like chains. I thought of Ember, trapped, and the untold price of salvation. Leave her out of this, I warned, feeling something, perhaps the shadows themselves, closing in around me. Ah, but she is intertwined with you now, just like the others you mourn. It purred, each syllable drenched in malice. Every connection has its price. I gritted my teeth, called upon courage I didn't possess, and seized my pulse of resolve. What price? What do I have to bleed? Your fear is like nectar to them, a sacrifice. Present the tangible anguish of the heart. A twisted sense of clarity crackled through my veins. In an instant, I felt the weight of years of anguish, anger, and despair rise within me, clawing at my psyche. A terrifying image encapsulated my thoughts, memories thrumming against the walls. Of reality, begging to be released. Slipping my fingers against my wrist, I made the decision. Then let it be done, I whispered, my voice steadier than I felt. But before I could properly enact my desperate offering, a violent tremor shook the chamber, the walls shuddering as though awakening from an ancient slumber. The shadows surged forward, howling as faces twisted in torment breached the surface from the depths of the altar, screaming for liberation, for vengeance, and for the taste of what they once knew. I screamed, backing away, but the pull was inescapable. As I grasped the offered blade sharp as ice, cold as the grave, the darkness around me thickened, coiling like serpents, resisting the bond one sought to forge. A shriek erupted from the Shadowsa cacophony of faces twisted in agony, and in that moment, I saw them. Ember among the others, frozen in horror, eyes wide with betrayal. "Stop! Don't claim me!" she screamed, her voice piercing through the noise, slashing through everything we were, everything we could never be. Terror ricocheted through my veins. And yet, before I could retract my hand, to escape the bargaining with the darkness, the shadows surged forward, overwhelming the altar, stealing my breath, and then, a blinding flash enveloped the cave. As I fell into its embrace, a whisper seeped into my subconscious, "Join us, you must know the truth." Every ounce of my will screamed for survival. But the shadows twisted tighter, weaving around me with relentless insistence until I tumbled into a new void. A voice echoed around, "Met his time, not Ember, but my own. Help us all." And in the all-consuming dark, that cacophony of dread became an undeniable truth. I had unleashed an unfathomable horror, but something stirred beyond the boundaries of my comprehension, something that now sought me. The darkness settled around me like a suffocating shroud. Each breath I took felt labored, as if I were inhaling the very essence of despair itself. Time masked itself in shadows, blurring the lines between reality and the horrifying memories that twisted at the edges of my mind. My heart raced, drowning in fear as the echoes of my own voice tangled with whispers that slithered through the void. "Help us all." In the oppressive silence, I saw them. Wisps of smoke and specters coalescing, amorphous and lurking just beyond my line of sight, coaxing me to surrender to the enveloping abyss. Faces emerged, twisted in silent screams, mouths moving as if chanting incantations meant for me, their hollow eyes boring into my soul. I clutched the cold blade tighter, its chilling surface a stark reminder of what was at stake. "Is this what you want?" I cried into the depths, desperately longing for an answer, for a morsel of clarity. But the shadows remained, pulsing and swirling, almost sentient in their malevolence. And as I stared into their depths, the flickering remnants of my memories took shape. "You have wickedly forgotten." A voice hissed from the void, its resonance curling around me, suffocating yet mesmerizing. "The past is a relentless beast. It frees those who crave truth. It consumes those who dare to remember." I found myself pulled into a vision, my surroundings shifting like sand beneath my feet. The altar merged with a nightmarish landscape, filled with twisted trees whose branches clawed at the crimson sky. Amber eyes glowed between the shadows, observing and learning, each heartbeat echoing a song of dread. There they stood, the echoes of my past, family and friends long lost, their forms flickering like dying embers, their faces warped with suspicion, shifting from compassion to accusation. "Why did you leave us? Why did you forget?" The haunting plea rose in unison. "No," I shouted, the blade slipping from my grip, clattering to the ground as I pleaded. "I didn't. I tried to save you." But their expressions only hardened, the shadows behind them swelling, hungry and eager. I staggered backward, collapsing onto the altar, desperation clawing away at my resolve. The faces morphed into silhouettes behind a veil of darkness, their voices rising into a chorus of rage and sorrow. "Your truth lies in your blood, coward," they cried, and the shadows surged forward once more, coiling around my arms and legs, pulling me inexorably towards the altar's chilling embrace. "Ember," I whimpered, the name a fragile remnant of a bond once unbreakable. The sound of her name seemed to slice through the cacophony, igniting a raw and painful recognition. I want to abandon you, but it was too late. The grasp of darkness constricted tighter, binding me as the shadows surged over the altar and around me, celebrating my despair. They thrummed in chaotic victory, growing more corporeal with every beat of my heart, drawing from my anguish and feeding on my essence that I had hoped you'd give in gracefully. The dark figure murmured, re-emerging from the edges of my vision, its presence imposing as ever. But your will falters. Embrace your sacrifice and we shall reveal what you fear to confront. Yet the shadows screamed as they flared with life, refusing to be tamed, engulfing me in waves of torment. I fought the tide, clawing at the air, struggling against the overwhelming force that sought to devour me completely until a voice cut through the chaos. Wake up! A forceful surge erupted from within me, igniting every ounce of resolve. I pummeled through the webs of darkness, pushing back against their grasp as the blood pounded in my ears. This life isn't over. But as I fought, a piercing scream shattered through the veil of shadows. Ember's voice, calling for me, raw with terror. The agony clawing at me sharpened, threatening to shatter my very core. No! I roared, and in that split second, the darkness recoiled, shredded momentarily. Breathless, I wrenched the blade from the ground and plunged it into the altar. Light erupted in a blinding flash, shooting through the chamber, illuminating the faces of the damned that writhed in despair. The shadows shrieked in fury, twisting back, their forms collapsing around me as if being pulled into the very void I tried so desperately to escape. But the illumination revealed an unforeseen truth. Surrounding me were not only the lost souls I had once known, but figures cloaked in red, bound by chains, thrumming with an ancient malevolence. Their mouths opened, a soundless scream echoing in the confines of my mind. A sudden manifestation of the prime horror I had dreaded. Join us, their voices rattled in unison, their chains rustling ominously. As the darkness began to claim me once more, the shadows whispered their final words, a chilling promise that seeped into my consciousness. Some doors cannot be closed, not without a greater price. With my heart pounding in fear, and the vision of Ember still ringing through my mind, I braced for the unknown, knowing I still held the key to an even darker revelation. Just then, a shattering sound broke the air, the ground trembled beneath me, and I could feel the very foundation of the chamber crack, splitting in two, and with an earth-shattering roar, the darkness consumed everything, leaving only a whisper that chilled my marrow, "You cannot escape what seeks to claim you." I woke up again, but this time it was different. The claustrophobic darkness slowly faded to reveal a familiar, yet unsettling scene. I was back in my own bedroom, the soft glow of the morning sun pushing against the curtains, fluttering like anxious wings. Everything looked ordinary, but the ugly truth curled in my gut like a snake ready to strike. The door was ajar, creaking gently against the wooden frame, inviting me to approach a sinister echo of the nightmarish realm I once thought I had escaped. Memories clamored in the depths of my mind, each one a reminder of my own complicity in the evil that followed. I stumbled toward it, can't help but take that fateful step across the threshold. A final act of terrible curiosity. Something felt profoundly wrong. The air was thick, charged with an eldritch energy that twisted my stomach. Just as I reached for the handle, a chill ran down my spine, and that whisper surged once more. A cacophony of voices bellowed together in a seamless orchestra of gloom. "You opened the door." I spun around, my breath quickening, ready to scream, to fight against the horror that sought to encroach upon my life once more. But as I turned back, the door swung wide opener. Was it always open? An inky blackness pulsated from within, beckoning me closer, exposing shadows that curled with anticipation. The pit in my stomach deepened. Dread washed over me like an unforgiving tide, relentless and cruel. Ember? Her name faltered at the tip of my tongue, echoing my desire for answers, for rescue. Without thinking, I stepped forward, desperately yearning to alleviate the horrors buried inside me, to reclaim the past and fix what I had broken. The air shifted, and suddenly, the shadows formed shapes. Faces I had long feared, manifested in a haunting dance like moths drawn to the flame. There, amidst the tide of gnarled limbs and hollow eyes, stood the familiar figure of Ember's silhouette angled among the lost souls, both chilling and beautiful. "You've returned," she lilted, but her voice dripped with a mixture of sorrow and rage that made my heart race. Hurt filled her hollow eyes, betraying kinship twisted into betrayal. "Did you think you could leave it all behind?" As I tried to grasp the truth pressed against my heart, I realized the deeper horror that had gripped me. My body felt leaden, heart thrumming against my ribcage like a prisoner in chains that I had forget it was not merely the darkness that haunted me, but my own essence interwoven with what I sought to awaken. "I came back for you." Desperation seeped into my voice. Her smile twisted into something grotesque, the shadows clinging hungrily to her frame. "But you cannot save us. You have become one of them." In that instant, the truth unfurled a raw epiphany that struck harder than any physical blow. My memories were entangled in this darkness, binding me as much as those who had vanished into despair as reality splintered. I collapsed, shadows enveloping me once more, each whisper voiced their grim acknowledgement. Their words became the brush that painted my fate. "You have invited us back. You let them in." And in that moment, I realized the doorway I thought I had closed only led to an unending cyclical loop, where innocence was devoured by the shadows invoked from my own fear and remorse. The cacophony grew louder, the urgency tinged with relish, as they clawed at the edges of my sanity. Then, as if shaking off the last vestiges of doubt, I spun to confront them. "No more," I howled, fury igniting within me like wildfire. The shadows recoiled, seething, hissing in pain. The truth was no longer a burden but a weapon. "I am not a vessel for your despair. I refuse to trap myself in your torment." The darkness writhed, pushing back against my defiance, a tempest of fury mocking my resolve. But within that chaos, something disconcertingly familiar coursed through me. Tethered to Ember was the very thing that had shackled me for so long. In that moment, I felt the weight of unyielding regret melt away, revealing a path that twisted deeper into the void, a chance to confront the true keeper of this nightmare. Suddenly, a blinding burst of light erupted, drawing the shadows into its hypnotic dance as I stepped forward, retreating no longer. "Together, Ember, together," I shouted, grasping at the tendrils reaching out for me, pulling me toward fader madness. As I lunged into the light, voices shrieked in hysterical disbelief, swirling into a cacophony of anguish. I triumphed through the crucible of fear, pulling Ember closer. We stood united in the blinking spectacle of shadows collapsing around us as we faced the very heart of the abyss. Together, we forged through, crashing into the core of darkness. The last thing I saw was Ember's defiant eyes burning in unity, and an overwhelming sensation washed over me, filling the void. An understanding, a shared acceptance of the past and all its horrors. The keeper they were waiting it was never meant to end. Even as realities crashed together, absorbing the full weight of our memories, there was a price too high to pay, a burden too dreadful to bear. And as the final shards of light imploded against the hungry shadows, we whispered our fate into the void, of final promise laden with resignation. Then, silence reclaimed everything once more. You cannot escape what lies within. My heart dropped as I realized, terror flooding my veins. A voice, familiar and chilling, still echoed from somewhere in the depths of the darkness. And the realization washed over me like ash. I had entered a labyrinth of shadows without an end, a horror I could never truly escape. The very echoes of my own self would haunt me eternally.